The timing wasn't great on that song, was it? It wasn't exactly 2 hours and 30 minutes, so I got to work on that. Hello, our users. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, about a 12-year user of R for normal, boring statistical and analytical applications. But for the majority of those 12 years, for I'd say 9 or 10 of those 12 years, I started kind of slowly. But I've been wrapping my entire project and executing my entire project within the same platform that I specify my R analyses. And so I started slow. I just did a couple of papers, self contained within our studio. And the analysis was there, and the write up was there, and the bibliography was there, the title page was there, the abstract was there. And then slowly over the course of those 9 or 10 years, I've gotten to this point where everything that I author, if I'm making a paper or a website or a book or slides, everything I do, I use this process that creates these products within the same environment that a lot of people associate solely only for statistical analysis. And so I call it R for authoring, or R is for authoring, kind of like A is for apple and B is for banana. R is for authoring. I think it's kind of funny. But I'm here every week to promote this way of actually structuring your work. And sometimes I'm joined by collaborators on projects that have similar orientations and philosophies with kind of the advantage and benefits of structuring your work this way. And we use the metaphor of an academic office hour. So I was a professor for so long, a full-time professor for so long. I'm still kind of comfortable with this concept of an office hour where I'm just going to be here. And if you want to stop by, you can. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them, and we'll see if we can work through them together. Here on YouTube, the way in which I was assuming that that would work was comments in the chat. So if someone has a question or has a request for something, you can put that in the comments in the chat. I know most people that watch these, they watch these not live but after the fact. So you can always just leave a. I think if you leave a comment to the video, I'll get that. You can email me. A few of you have emailed me. I think my contact information is available on the channel that these take place on. Speaking of that, if you want to promote, so I'm here promoting this. If you want to promote it, you can like the video, you can subscribe to the channel, and get notifications when we go live. That would help out. But I really believe that this is a strong way to structure your work if you're working in any sort of analytical, quantitative area or arena. It minimizes error. Just there's so many advantages of doing this, and it's so accessible. It's so more accessible right now than it was 9 or 10 years ago when I first started this. So there's a lot of support out there available. This channel, I guess, included. So our main purpose of being here is to engage in this process of we have an open office door, and if anyone wants to pop by and ask a question, we're here for that, and we'll collectively see if we can um, figure out whatever it is that you're interested in. Maybe you're having a bit of a issue trying to do this, or maybe you just want to know how to get started. Those are all potential issues. A problem is maybe a little pejorative, but those are all issues that we could work through together here. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. That's not going to start early again, is it? So in the absence of, I was going to say a frog in my throat, but since we have Bullwinkle J Moose coming up, I'll say I have a moose in my throat. That's kind of what it feels like. But in the absence of somebody popping by and saying, hey, Kulas, what about this? What we've been doing is we've been taking a look at focused issues and focused capabilities using these platforms that facilitate the wrapping of your code with your narration or the story that you're trying to tell around that code. And so tonight, I'm really excited about tonight because I don't get preachy on this stuff. I'd like to say we're here to promote it, and I think this is a good way to structure work. I try to avoid using kind of judgment words like you should be doing this or this is what you ought to be, because who am I? I'm just a guy. But I think I do have uh, I do feel emboldened a little bit to say if you're a professor or a student, I think you should be using what we're going to go over tonight, which are reveal slides. Specifically, if you're endeavoring to teach something like Python or R, this is the medium through which you should be delivering that if you have slides. I will say that. I will be judgmental on that. And so I'm hoping that maybe what we see tonight will entice some people to actually jump on board if you're not already on board doing this. I know a lot of you are. Um, when I say a lot of you are with a little wink, I'm talking to professor friends. But I would like to get, in my field, everybody should be doing this. And I know that's a kind of a bold statement to make, but I feel very strongly about that. Okay. So we're going to get to those reveal slides in just a bit. But before we do that, because every week the way that we explore these topics, so we're going to, the reveal slides, it's going to be a little more structured than normal, but oftentimes with a topic, a feature focus that we're looking at, it's entirely exploratory, open-ended. I don't have any sort of plan or roadmap for what we're going to do. Because of that, each week we do actually do a recap of what happened last week that's presented in a little more easy to digest format. But before we do that, we got to get to our transition. We can't just jump right into it. We need our transition into what the heck happened last week.
Last time you remember, Bullwinkle's weather forecasting bunion had got him and his pal Rocky in a peck of trouble. Two mysterious figures entered their little house, tied and gagged Rocky, and used a sleeping potion on Bullwinkle while it was still in the bottle. Then they carefully packed up Bullwinkle's hoof and carried it, and him, out of the house and into the night. Sometime later, Rocky managed to free himself and grabbed the telephone to call for help.
Hello, Sheriff Wright. This is Rocky. Two fellas just came in here and took... Oh, hello, Mabel. Well, I'd like to talk to... Well, I'm fine, thanks. Could I speak... No, he's not so good. Somebody... No, it's not a cold in the antlers. Somebody stole his bunion. Oh, never mind. I'll go see the sheriff.
And in a twinkling, Rocky was zooming low over the rooftops of Frostbite Falls on his way to the sheriff's office.
I gotta hurry. Who knows where they're taking Bullwinkle or why?
Good questions, those, for at that moment, at a nearby deserted airstrip, the unconscious form of Bullwinkle Moose was being loaded aboard a fast plane.
All set, you guys. Take off.
And the plane zoomed skyward as Bullwinkle groggily began to recover.
Let me off at 17th Street, please.
I let that one go a little longer than normal because I didn't want anyone to be traumatized by Bullwinkle not coming to out of his groggy state. So that one was a little longer than normal. The slides, I forgot to mention, the slides each week I make those are published, and those are now available in the comments if you look on the comments to this video. If you are watching this video within, I believe it's about 24 hours of when we're live here, those comments may not yet be populated. So if you look in the description of the video, there will also be a link to this week's slides. And each week when I put these slides together, and I use Reveal, I'll use what we're going to talk about tonight to make these slides. But each week when I put them together, there's a bunch of hyperlinks and resources embedded within them. So, excuse me. So I'm hoping that I don't die. But in addition to me not dying, I'm also hoping that people use those. So they're always available. And I mentioned last week that I'm kind of using a new workflow for the publishing of those and sharing of those. I'm not 100% comfortable with what I have quite yet, but I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to amend that. In addition to this week's slides in the comments, I've also been putting in a link to a walkthrough if you're interested in building your own report, and that's one way to see kind of some of the power of what we're doing. So if you follow that walkthrough, the only addition that you need on your local computer, in addition to the walkthrough, is you're going to need Quarto. So the software that we talked about last week, and it's an independent installation. It's not a package. It's actually something that you search for on the internet. If you hit this hyperlink here at Quarto, it'll take you to a place where you can actually download it and put it on your local machine. But as long as you have that loaded and you don't need to You don't need to be careful about where it is. The installation wizard should actually take care of all of the kind of identification in terms of other programs being able to find it that's needed on your local machine. So it's a smooth installation. But if you have that, you can go ahead and follow the walkthrough and build your own template report. Now, the content of that report is focused on psychological measurement, something called psychometrics, but that should be considered immaterial. You should, if you do the walkthrough, you should kind of get a sense of some of the capabilities and what you can do, and you can swap out your own analyses and content in there. So last week we took a look at Quarto from not a specific product perspective, but more holistically from what this piece of software is. I had a ton of fun last week because I've always wanted to divorce a Quarto document from R and R Studio, or from Jupyter Lab, which is another IDE that we've looked at, or from Positron, or from, I just wanted to pretend like I don't have anything quantitative in terms of a window and platform to work with, and see if we could still get Quarto to render just as an independent piece of software on our computer. And we did. It was awesome. I loved it. So we made a notepad Quarto document and we rendered that. There's a couple things that we didn't test that in retrospect I think we should have, but maybe in a year or so we'll come back and see if we can actually do that. And this is not, so what I have here tonight was actually stolen from the walkthrough, an early portion of the walkthrough document that I have a link to. Part of that kind of explains this as well. So I'm doing shared content here, which is one of the great things about RevealJS slides, is it's very easy to share content. But I mention that because this is not a way of thinking about Quarto that I've seen other people present. This is just kind of how I look at it. And so if I'm trying to explain to, for example, a student what Quarto is and why you might want to use it, and more importantly, how you use it, I would probably start with trying to communicate that within a Quarto document, there's 3 different types of things that you specify. So there's 3 important things for you to know. And one is what's called a YAML, and the YAML is the front matter within your Quarto document. And another way to think about a way to think about what the front matter does is I think of it as like an executive function. It's really kind of sitting on top of the document, and it's looking at the entirety of what you're producing, and it's making global specifications. So it's saying in an executive sense, in a global sense, in a very broad sense, this is what I want, and this is what I want it to look like, generally speaking. And so that can be done in your YAML. So you can do the things that are most important here are you want to specify the thing that you're interested in producing. So tonight we're going to talk about RevealJS slides. And that's specified here on lines 4 and 5 in my YAML. Now the YAML itself is identified by 3 dashes to open and 3 dashes to close, adjacent dashes. The title and the author, those are things that are typically go into a document. You don't need to have those, but it's something that people like to do. I've kind of gotten in the habit of, on my slide decks, well, I guess it depends on the purpose. For these live streams, what I've been doing is I don't have authorship on these. That's, I suppose, one of the reasons why when we start I say I'm John Koulas, just because it doesn't say on the slide. But most people would want an author. And then what else do I have here? The other thing that we played with last week that's kind of unique to the YAML, the front matter specification, is historically the indentations that you have are finicky and tricky and a little it's a common source of error in terms of getting your document to render. So the one kind of caveat to using Quarto to create documents is it's going to be a little riskier than going to something like Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word, I can't think of a circumstance where you write the quick brown dog jumped over the lazy whatever the heck that old typewriter kind of sentence is. I can't think of a situation where Word would say, nah, I'm not going to give you that. That this is a possibility with Quarto. So it is a possibility that you misspecify something to the point where the rendering of the Quarto document, so the transition from the scripting that you've done to the product that you want, it's possible that there's going to be a glitch there. Now, those glitches, you can overcome them. You always can overcome them, and that's part of the process of coding. If you're actually doing data analysis, you know the same. You're familiar with this process of, oops, that didn't work, and I need to go debug, or I need to look at what I did and how I scripted it and try to understand where the issue was. So for novice R users, that's one of the frustrations that we typically hear about is just, it doesn't work and why doesn't it work? And I think I did everything right. So there is going to be an element of that with Quarto as well. And so one of the common areas where you see a misspecification is in the indentations of kind of command or arguments kind of hierarchy and whether you've specified that correctly. Now there's so much help out there that and the errors that you get have become more and more informative and helpful, and the indentation itself has become a lot more tolerant over the course of different versions of Quarto that are released. So just something to be aware of, but it shouldn't be considered like a fatal or overly consequential aspect of using these documents. So there's the front matter called YAML, and then there's the prose, or what you actually write, the actual sentences, the paragraphs, the content itself. And so we're just generally referring to this as narrative. And this is the same type of content that you would typically write in a word processor or just on a steno or a notepad. I I watched too many 1950s and 60s shows, so I probably shouldn't use a word like steno, but when I see that icon, I think of a steno pad. So, and then the way that you specify how you want things to be displayed or look is most commonly accomplished through applying markdown. And we've spent quite a few weeks talking about different ways of specifying markdown and different markdown editors and different flavors of markdown. But common conventions in terms of I want to do something with the formatting of content is 2 asterisks mean I want what's ever encapsulated there or in between the asterisks. I want that to be presented in bold font. If you have one apostrophe, I'm sorry, not apostrophe, asterisk, that should be displayed in italics. And then there's headings that commonly are denoted with hashtags or pound signs. There's superscripts that you can actually have. Those across different flavors of Markdown, those seem to be commonly indicated. Sometimes it's multiple ways, but by using a caret surrounding the content that you want to actually be the superscript itself. So there is kind of a learning curve in terms of how to specify not only what I'm trying to say, but what I want it to look like. But it's fairly universal, and it's actually pretty powerful because that enables you to actually share the content of what you're writing and really tweak the formatting of it kind of as a separate consideration. So the formatting, given the way that you've scripted things, you can oftentimes request the way in which it looks to be quite different across different renderings, given the same specifications. So you have the same source document, but you can actually just tweak it in terms of what I want it to look like, oftentimes using a YAML specification. And so, anyway, it's a very powerful way of structuring documents, just using Markdown to control the way that things look in terms of your narration. And then the thing that Quarto is really, the aspect of Quarto that's probably most stand out-ish in terms of why would I use an authoring system like this instead of just going to Microsoft Word or Google Docs or some other kind of more conventional word processing piece of software, is the integration of the analytical components. So the thing that really makes Quarto very, very appealing and attractive for data scientists or social, behavioral, managerial, health sciences people who are doing quantitative things is those quantitative things are parts of your living document. So they can be self-contained within your paper or website or slide deck itself or themselves. So the computations are really where you see the power of Quarto. And these are just the same specifications that you would include in an R script, but you're now including them in a document specification instead of a standalone R script. No longer do you keep your analyses in kind of one area of your computer and the discussion of your analyses in a second part. Now it's all in the same location, and that's massively powerful. So the computations, the way that these work is you take your R script and you don't need to just use R, but I'm going to stick with R because I think most of you are likely using that language, that analytical language. But you indicate that I'm about to introduce not text, so not words, but I'm about to indicate some computational code. And you indicate that there's a couple different ways you indicate it, but the most common way to indicate it is to use 3 ticks, and then in curly brackets, the language that is following, and then 3 ticks to end it. So in a very general sense, when we open and close like this, the convention that seems to be used is to refer to those as fences. So my opening 3-tick fence and my closing 3-tick fence. And as a matter of fact, you'll see me call these YAML opening and closing specifications as fences as well. I think I probably call them fences in here, opening and closing fences. If it's the YAML, it's 3 dashes. If it's a bit of code, it's 3 ticks. And so these symbols are important. And so it's another aspect of the learning curve, I think, that is there when you're trying to author using these sorts of approaches. But once you learn it, I don't see how you would ever go back. And it's not that steep of a learning curve. And there are so many templates out there and kind of starter files. You can really just, if you look through them, you can get a sense of how to structure something, and it comes to you eventually. What else do I want to say about this? I guess that's enough. Let's get to Reveal. Let's get the RevealJS slides because these are so fun. These are, as I say, I'm going to be preachy and judgmental on this. I'm going to just come out and say, if you're a professor, if you're a student, if you're a data scientist, you should be using these. I feel pretty confident in actually saying that. And what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to hopefully try to show you some of the capabilities of these slides that will encourage you to say, okay, I see, I get it. I see why there's so many neat capabilities and features here that would be enticing to someone in an educational context or someone in a data science context. So these are what I have listed here in the left-hand column. These are built-in capabilities that making reveal slides via Quarto have built into them. Now there's different ways of generating these reveal slides. If you follow this hyperlink, I have 2 hyperlinks on this title on this particular slide. The white RevealJS hyperlink will take you to the very general presentation of what RevealJS is, some of the philosophy behind it, and then some of the capabilities as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of those capabilities. So at the very top here on the banner, they give you a example presentation of some of the capabilities of RevealJS slides. Now you're already seeing some kind of neat animation on the right here in terms of navigation, but there are you can actually kind of, and this is a complexity, you can consider this a good thing or a bad thing, but there are up and down kind of navigations that you can do. So if you want to hide a slide, you can have it, there's different ways to hide, but one way to kind of one way to deal with something that you may or may not want to present is to have a different route toward accessing it. So you can go up or down trees. One of the great things and one of the reasons it's a great fit for Quarto is it has some of these code highlighting and code presentation capabilities. These in Quarto, these are all going to have a copy clipboard embedded within them. Now, I don't see that actually happening here. We're outside of Quarto. We're just in the RevealJS kind of demo that walks you through some of the things you can do. It's fragmentation. There's backgrounds. A lot of these are going to be shared with Quarto. So if you look at, let's go back. No, I went too far. I'm going to have to actually go back to my slides themselves, and it's going to be a little easier if I do that. I put fragments in this week, which normally I don't do, and it's a kind of a pain in the butt to navigate doing that, but I did it. So if you follow this via Quarto title component, it'll take you to some of the same information, but it'll present RevealJS not in a general sense, in terms of something that's available to everyone, regardless of whether you're a data scientist or not, that facilitates the creation of these slides. This blue link will take you to RevealJS as specifically enabled and facilitated via Quarto. So Quarto is one way to author these slides. It's not the only way. And it's probably not the most popular way to author these slides. There's a corresponding commercial website. I think it's called slides.com. And on that website, you can also create these slides. But the great thing about us is we have this free platform, and this free platform is called Quarto. And Quarto is sufficient for everything I want to do and need to do to make these slides. As a matter of fact, for someone who touches numbers and quantitative and analytical things, Quarto is probably better suited to generate these slides than is something like the online portal. So there's several ways to make RevealJS slides. We're going to focus on Quarto. And so some of the capabilities that come built into Quarto Reveal slides, I have here in the left-hand column. There's links to each of these capabilities. And I'm going to actually probably talk about these most commonly from a teaching orientation. So I really would like to communicate to other professors, to other instructors, how powerful these slides are in the delivery of instruction. And so I've been, even though I'm not a full-time professor anymore, I do pick up an occasional class. And it's a little easier for me just focusing on one class at a time to say this. But transitioning my old PowerPoint slides over to RevealJS slides, I'm so glad I've been doing it. If I have the opportunity to teach in the future, I'll be doing this as well, because I think the teaching, the fit of these slides with the philosophy of teaching and the kind of meeting the student where they are, it's just so well suited. And I'm not doing a great job of selling it, but let's look through some of these features. One of the things that the last class that I taught, that I transitioned from PowerPoint slides to RevealJS slides, ended up appreciating, was a feature built in here where it's called multiplex. But what multiplex does is it allows you as I'm just going to say instructor, thinking of a classroom context, but you as the presenter, instructor, professor, you control the advancement of slides that everyone else is looking at. So you give the students or whoever it is that you're presenting to, you give them the slides, but you have a master slide. And that master slide controls the advancement and the progression of everyone else's slides. It's so cool. It worked out so well in this last class because the students ended up being fantastic note takers. They all had a local version of my slides so they could see everything nice and clear and crisp and available on their devices. But they could also be free to take notes, and they didn't have to advance anything or interact with anything or go surf the web. Some of them probably still did that anyway. But they could actually have the instructor control that. And that's enabled through a very simple command in the YAML, you just say, yeah, I want that by saying multiplex true. And it's fantastic. It's so neat. It's so cool. I love it. Another aspect of that is you can publish these slides, the weekly slides that you're looking at. There are many different options in terms of hosting of these. There's many free options in terms of hosting, and so you can make these available to students instead of putting it in Canvas or Blackboard or whatever LMS system your school is using or organization is using. You can actually host these. You can host these on the web. Now, I got in trouble for doing that at this last university because the university decided that they didn't like that. They didn't like it being my slides being available. So unfortunately, I had to make some of that information private upon request of that university. But that's not a reason. That's not a reasonable thing to happen when you're putting up something like lecture slides. Make them available. Let other people have access to them. Let the students have access to them whenever they want. So it's very easy to publish these in terms of hosting. The teaching specifically of the teaching specifically of quantitative methods is greatly facilitated using Quarto. So you can have you can present bits of code, and those bits of code, there's different ways to actually present them. If you go through my tutorial, a lot of what I have in that, and again, it's linked in the comments, the tutorial to build your own template report. But a lot of what I have in there is fenced code such that when you engage with the clipboard and you decide that you want to copy that, or you decide that you want to paste that in somewhere, when I paste it, I get the entire what's called code chunk or code block. So that is, I'm getting the ticks and I'm getting the curly brackets. Now, we're mostly going to talk about using R, not Python, but there's multiple languages that you can actually do. So this is powerful for trying to, and you don't have to do this. So I can hide that. So I can just give them code that can go into a script, or I can give them code that's going to fit into something like a Quarto document. So in terms of teaching, and you're going to see this format if you look at the Quarto help pages at all, you're going to see a lot of code that's presented there with a clipboard, usually indicated by kind of a grayed out background. But all of that you can copy and paste and put in, and that's awesome for teaching. So teaching students how to engage with these products without getting stuck on some of the kind of specific specifications of how do I script that. So if you're dealing with a class of 20 to 30 and somebody gets stuck with what's a tick, right, you don't have to worry about that. It's taken care of. So the teaching aspect specifically for quantitative topics, I think this is really well suited for that. Not going along with that, you have code annotations, and there's different presentations of the annotation that you can elect to have. So this presentation is static, such that the code is the annotation that you want in terms of helping understand what the code is. It's presented here at the bottom of the code chunk. You can have, I think there's 3 different ways of dealing with code information. The one that I like to use is this, the hover upon, or information upon hover. And so what you're actually seeing here is you're seeing a portion of the code being highlighted with the annotation itself coming up when you pop up. And so this is something that's helpful, again, for students or learners of this, where you not only give them the code that you can still copy using the clipboard, but if they want a little extra, what is that and what does it mean, or can I get some more information, you can hide that. So it's kind of a way of using comments, but comments that are there, you can either have them just by default available, or you can have them there if they really want to search for them. You can fold that code. I didn't put that in this list because I was running out of space, but folding the code just simply means it's only going to be visible if the learner, I'm just going to say learner instead of student. So if the learner chooses to activate it or ask for it. So if you have something like a homework assignment, or are trying to teach a new function or a new procedure using, let's say, R, you can have that hidden in these slides, and they only get that clue if they interact with it and ask for it. You can do that through annotations. You can also do that through code folding. I love using lightbox images. So lightbox images are pop-outs. So if you want to engage with that visual a little stronger, you can just click on it and it gives you a bigger picture. You can apply this to images like this. You can also apply it to figures and R generated visuals. And again, just like with the multiplex function, the specification of these images is really super easy. It's a it's a switch. It's like a light switch. So you turn it, you toggle it off and on. And if you want that capability, you just say true. You can do that for the entire document, or you can just do that on an image by image basis. So that's super neat. You don't you don't actually need that with these slides, however, if you're presenting, because there's also something called Zoom on here, and Zoom is just engaging with these slides as the viewer of the or consumer of the slides by using the Alt button and your mouse. If I use the Alt button and mouse, I just zoom in on one area of the actual presentation. So if there's information that's presented, a little small, and you want to blow it up, you can actually do that just by Alt click. And so Alt click will actually zoom into whatever the thing is that you want to highlight on the slide itself. So this little cute little bunny, it's being revealed out of a magician's hat. We can zoom in on that. And then cross references. These were super helpful in transitioning from my PowerPoint slides to my RevealJS slides for the most recent class that I did, because I like to tie in later learned content to previously learned content. So I could very easily, and this is something that I haven't seen people do with PowerPoint slides. So this is a unique capability, I think. Because, or if these are web hosted, you can go ahead and cross-reference from your focal slide to a previous lesson or to a previous point that's been made. So, for example, if we're doing an analysis and we say, yes, here's a t-test. Look at, we're reading somebody's presentation of a research study that they've done, and they did a t-test. You remember when we talked about t-test? Here it is. If you want to go back and look at the lesson, here it is. Now you can cross-reference like that. You can also cross-reference within a presentation itself. So the tutorial that I pasted into the comments is chock full of cross-references from one section of that tutorial to other sections. And so I want people to be able to navigate. I have a table of contents that's repeated throughout that document. And if you want to revisit any of those topical areas, you can just click on a hyperlink and it'll take you to that page. So cross-referencing is super powerful. Again, I think very not only for teaching purposes, but certainly if you want to reinforce a concept and tie back to, we've had this before, remember when we've had this, or this is how it's applicable, this is why it's germane. It's fantastic. It's great for that. There are, in addition to these and by the way, I'm not doing it proper justice. There are so many capabilities within these slides themselves that you as an instructor are going to find useful. These are just some that I've used and some that kind of stand out to me. There are so many, it's very difficult, honestly, to just kind of isolate some, but these are definitely some that I've really explicitly, upon reflection, definitely have appreciated. So there's also, in addition to these built-in capabilities, there is an entire kind of ecosystem of extensions. Now, these are focused capabilities that other people have been working on and saying, hey, it would be neat if it could do this. Some of these eventually get folded into newer releases of Quarto's RevealJS capabilities. So for example, multiplex, that function used to be only available through an extension, but now it comes built in with Quarto. If you download Quarto, you're going to have the capability of generating these multiplex slides. And I used to call them zombie slides. So having living dead zombies of what you're presenting, that's now built in. Some of these I think might eventually get built in as well. I really enjoy the Iconify extension, and that facilitates, that is kind of my one-stop shop now for all kinds of little visuals, for logos, for emojis, for things like that. So everything you see on this slide, except I think the reveal the reveal logo itself, I think I just took an image for that. But if you look at, for example, the Quarto symbol, or if you look at any of these, the sharing symbol or the teaching symbol or the red dot, those I took all from Iconify. And so Iconify is kind of my go-to one-stop shop right now for little visuals, emojis, logos, things like that. And there's a link here to each of these extensions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each of these because I don't have the pointer extension, and I'm going to walk you through how to add an extension and use an extension, and we'll see what that actually looks like. Snow, you've seen this. You've seen this on my, if you followed the holiday cards that we created. So Snow is an extension, a silly extension, but it actually just, there's bits of snow that come down. As someone from Minnesota originally, I appreciate that. I've lived kind of all over the place a little bit. So when I get homesick, I can do, if I'm not in Minnesota and I get homesick, I can do snow slides. That's a very kind of, so you can see some of these extensions, they're not going to be built into future versions of Quarto as a baseline software because they're just kind of quirky, but that quirkiness is awesome as well. There's other people that love this and appreciate it, and they're using these kind of one-off, or they're not going to be super popular or always applicable kind of functions. This one, quiz, I started using this in all of my undergraduate RevealJS presentations. So at the end of each slide deck, I give them 5 or 6 multiple choice questions that give them feedback on the content of that day's lecture. These are super easy to specify, and they're functional individually for every student that has access to these slides. It'll give you feedback. London obviously is the capital of France. What? Incorrect. Let's reset that. Is it Paris? Look at that. It's correct. It is Paris. And so you can progress through these, and I thought these were fantastic. Who knows to what extent the students actually used them, but again, it's another tool in your toolkit in terms of trying to engage with the student and trying to get them to be a little active with the material in terms of interacting with it. And there's just so many capabilities here with these slides where you can do something like that. So I love them. Pointer, we're going to come back to because we're going to install it. But I guess I can show you what it does. So supposedly what Pointer does, if we can get to it, is it gives you kind of this nice laser type visual on your cursor. Now I have something like this on my computer, and some of you maybe have seen that occasionally, but we can also isolate this to just RevealJS slides. And so I think we'll actually do that here tonight, because I don't have it, but we'll take a look at it. And then the third thing, I guess, that is really important with these RevealJS slides via Quarto is, of course, again, the thing that really makes Quarto kind of special in terms of an authoring platform is not just the quality. They call it publication ready quality, not just the way things look, but the integration with the quantitative stuff. So the focus of this for most people is going to be presentation and embedding of their quantitative analysis and the quantitative investigation that they've actually done. So anything you can do in R, anything you can do in Python, anything you can do in a few different languages, honestly, is available here within these slides. There's interactivity. Now, this interactivity is not something, again, that is easily accomplished via PowerPoint. Generally speaking, what I've seen people do if they want to engage in interactivity is they'll have a hyperlink outside of their slide deck. Now, maybe that's changing. Maybe Google Slides is a little better with that. But certainly, if you want to create something like a Plotly object and have that available to be interacted with, that's what Quarto is built on. That's what it's made for. It's essentially its core purpose is an integration of presentation capabilities with this data analysis and presentation of quantitative information. Okay, so anyway, I talked a lot about why I like it, but let's actually play with it. I want to show you some of these features and how to actually do them. So all you need is you need to have Quarto installed on your machine. I'm going to close out of this project. Now, you do not need to work in a project directory in order to do any of what we're about to do. But since we're going to load that extension, extensions are easiest to work with if you're working within a project directory. So only because I'm interested in that extension are we going to create a project directory here. So I'm going to my slides online because I lost them in my local preview. And I want to keep this open just as a reminder to myself of what we want to cover here in the next, hopefully not longer than 15-20 minutes or so. Let's go through some of these built-in capabilities before we do the pointer. And again, the only reason I'm creating a new project folder is because I am interested in installing that extension. And extensions are easier if you have a project folder. Okay, so let's call this Reveal. And in our studio, it's going to refresh and spin up a fresh window that has my folder indicated here in my files pane. So I'm in users, erg-admin, desktop, reveal. And then you see this R project file that comes with every project folder that you create from within our studio. Now, Positron kind of has a new way of doing things, so you're not going to have that rproj file, but we have it. We do have it with our studio. Okay, so what happened to my, there we are. So let's check out this pointer extension. So the way that these extensions work are going to be, there's a link to each of the extensions if you're interested in it in this week's slides. But the way in which you install the extension is typically done at your terminal. So you can access the terminal if you're on a PC type machine. You can exit the terminal through your computer, or within our studio there should be a terminal tab as well. And so that terminal tab, copying and pasting might work a little different in your terminal tab than you're used to in something like a word processor. So you may need to engage with the mouse, right click in order to paste. The thing about working from these GitHub pages is it's just people. Some of these people are well seasoned in what they do, and then there's some people that are like me, or like just kind of fiddlers around with things, and so there might be some quirks in terms of the instructions themselves. So the reason I mention that is the clipboard here unfortunately grabbed the $sign. We do not want the $sign to be copied, so I just erased that here. But Quarto add from my terminal should walk me through a series of questions. It always asks you, Quarto has this built in. This is a Quarto. This is a Quarto piece of feedback that we're actually seeing here because the command itself is saying, "Hey, Quarto software, I want you to help out." So Quarto always asks if you trust the authors. I don't know any of the authors that I've ever engaged with extensions, but I'm a very trustworthy person, so I always say yes. And my identity, well, I'm not going to say that. I don't want to jinx myself. They're always going to have also this second question. The first couple times I saw it, I was like, well, do I already have something here? Why is it asking me if it's going to make changes? And the initial change is just you don't have anything and you're about to get something. So just be prepared for that. You're gonna actually see that every time, and then they usually ask you, I think every time ask you if you want to view documentation. We probably should, but that's no fun, right? No fun if you read the directions. Let's try to put it together without reading the directions. Now the reason we wanted to do this within a project folder is going through these steps within the terminal here, created a new folder within my project folder called _extensions. And this is where these additional capabilities are going to be stored. So for every project that you do, if you engage with an extension quite a bit on different products, you're going to need a central location where you can access those extensions. I mentioned that I'm not 100% happy with my workflow yet for the new hosting that I have. And part of the reason for that is kind of the way I have to structure things so I can reuse the same extensions every week. And so it's not perfect. But here's the specifications. These are all of the files. There's only 3 for this particular extension that facilitate the capability that we're interested in. Now, you don't need to look at those. You can look at those if you want, but you certainly don't need to. Oops, I went one folder too low. Let's look for reveal. It's apparently a lot in that. There's a lot in that there folder. Okay, so we're gonna let's create within this project directory, let's create a Quarto presentation. We're gonna do a RevealJS presentation. And it's always, again, I always recommend rendering the template just to make sure that everything on your system is set up such that you can render so you don't have any problems with the software. That's helpful. So let's call this playing. How many playing files do I have on this computer? I forgot about my three quotas. So there's number 2. Hopefully I'll remember one more before we end here. So it created presentations. Now, one thing I didn't talk about that we should take a look at here are the kind of formatting of these presentation slides. By default, they're going to be very plain Jane-ish. So white background, a kind of non-obtrusive font there. It's sans serif. Is that sans serif? I mean, there's little bends on the T's and the L, so maybe not. It doesn't look too curlish, but it's a little curlish, I guess. But the font itself is, kind of not too obtrusive. If you look at my slides, I like to get crazy with my slides. So there's weird fonts here, and there's all kinds of pictures. There's a bunny coming out of a hat. Oh my goodness, what's going on? There's a washed out background here with dark blue around the edges, and it gets light in the middle, like Atlas 3i is looking at us or something. So I've spent some time customizing the look and appearance of my slides. You can certainly do that. By default, they're going to look like this, but Quarto also has a bunch of kind of canned themes. They say 11. This keeps changing. And you got to be careful because these are not shared with different product types. That threw me for a loop early. Now, oh, there it is, Dracula. So one of these is a recent addition, and I love it. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because of the name or because of how it looks. But you can do a really quick kind of tweak to your slides if you just want to add one of these themes. That's a very easy way if you don't want to spend a lot of time on customizing it to uh, get it to look exactly like what you want it to look like from the get-go. You can just add a theme, and that already changes. It should change the font. It'll change the colors. It'll change kind of the background. Oftentimes, you see that the bold now is coming through in a different color. Well, let's do one more quick one here, just because I don't know. I guess this is more like I feel like it's Halloween or something instead of being between Christmas, Hanukkah, and Valentine's Day. Look at me, I'm doing bloody things. I wanted to do a different one because I wanted to show some font change. The font change between Dracula and default didn't look that drastic to me, but here certainly you're seeing maybe it's just capitalized, but it looks like the content's being displayed quite a bit different there. So that's a really easy, quick and fast way to kind of customize what your slides look like. Blood just doesn't look good there, so I'm going to do it back to Dracula. And let's look at some of these capabilities. So we have this extensions folder, and we also have some description at the bottom of this hyperlink here on the GitHub repository that contains the extension itself. There should be some explanation of how to actually use it. There's going to be different specifications within your YAML for different extensions. Filter is sometimes used, I believe. RevealJS plugins is sometimes used. But they will always walk you through how to use it within the GitHub repository itself. Usually toward the bottom of the repository. It's kind of it's fairly standard. So I'm going to copy just this reveals plugin component because I'm guessing that that's all we probably need. But we also need to know how to activate it. So by default, you can activate the pointer by pressing the Q while viewing. When activated, a 16 pixel red pointer will be used. And then, of course, we could change all that if we wanted to, but let's just see if we can get the functionality here. So these extensions, I usually specify them toward the bottom of my YAML. They're a little easier for me to recognize that, oh yeah, I have extra goop on here. And currently, if I look at the presentation, you can see if I hit Q, nothing happens. It's like, what are you doing? There's no functionality with Q. You silly. But now if I re-render that and go back into that document, now if I hit Q, there it is. There's my pointer. So that's how easy these extensions are actually used. Now I'll probably keep this one because I think I like it. And I'll probably play with this Rudolph nose a little bit and see if I can maybe get a different type of pointer. Ooh, I didn't know that. In Dracula, look at that. I love the color, and you can go in and change this if you want. But I love the color tweak from the hyperlink itself to the hover on the hyperlink. And then there's usually a different setting for that's been accessed as well. So if I access it and go back, no, it doesn't look like they changed that at all. So a visited versus an unvisited URL looks the same to me anyway within the Dracula theme. Okay, so let's look at some of these other capabilities that we can do within Quarto. So not using an extension, but let's just look at some of these. Kind of built-in features. So let's do, what do we want to do? There's no comments. No one has. Let's do a lightbox because those are probably some of the easier things to do. I'm just going to set, well, yeah, I'll set it to true, but before that, I'm just going to comment that out. One of the things I love about YAMLs is they share the same commenting notation as R script. So just that hashtag means, hey, don't do this, but I might want to come back and unhashtag it later. So let's add within our presentation here. Well, I like that hyperlink. I'm going to keep that. because I like the colors on it. But we're going to add a figure, and the markdown specification for a figure is just exclamation point, square bracket, and then look at this guy. So I'm going to right click and copy that image. I'm going to put him in. See if it comes through. That URL looks a little wonky to me, so I'm not sure that that's going to come through. Oh, there he is. Okay. Now if I engage with this, if I click with it, nothing happens. Now I could use that alt click capability that comes built in with these RevealJS slides, and I could get some engagement there. But if you want to standardize it, you can set lightbox true. Now some of these commands are probably going to be subcommands under the reveal type format, so I might have to structure my YAML a little different. And you start to see some of the, I'm not sure I want to do that because there's a little obstacle towards specification. But you learn pretty quickly, and actually if it doesn't work, you'll get an error, and that error is going to actually be helpful in terms of you knowing what happened. And honestly, when we're going kind of incrementally like this, like layering different capabilities, it's pretty easy to isolate where the error came from. So this is Lightbox, and there's different settings on Lightbox as well in terms of you can make galleries within Lightbox. Instead of putting it at the YAML level, I could just do it with only this image. If I just do, whoops, what did I do? I think I accidentally hit that hyperlink. If I set that to false, but said this particular image, I actually want to have Lightbox capability. And there's plenty of help pages that walk you through this as well. I believe I don't need square bracket specification around this. I think the curly bracket is going to be sufficient, but we'll see. We can play with it, and if it doesn't work, we'll come back and tweak it a little bit. It didn't work. So what I probably need to do is encompass this whole thing in square brackets. And again, it starts to look a little wonky in terms of the specification itself. Why is that not working? Is it not dot lightbox? Did I spell lightbox wrong? All right, let's come back to that. We should be able to go just image by image, but I have a slight wrong specification on there, and I'm not sure off the top of my head what it is. We'll come back to that at the very end. I'll fix that. But I want to get to some of these other capabilities. In terms of teaching and echoing code, there are different ways to echo that code. And I'm going to put Dracula probably on a later chunk, not on this early chunk. Ooh, look at those bullet colors. I like the bullet colors too. Maybe I just like that color, whatever that cyan is. The code currently is not echoing, and that might be something that I have set on my machine. These code chunks, just like in the YAML, we can do specifications. We can do the same specifications within the code chunk itself if we want to apply it just one by one as we're going with this code. So I want to share this. I want to share not only the results of this code chunk, but I want to share the R commands themselves. So I'm going to set echo to true. And now if we look, I get the code chunk, and with these code chunks within Quarto, you always have this copy to clipboard capability enabled right here, and it's fantastic. Obviously for 1+1 it's not so fantastic, but if I did something like a graph specification, that's something that students might be interested in terms of how'd you do that. I want to do that too. You can share it really easy. So let's see if we can find I had a couple that I used for this week's slides. I think I initially had a bubble chart in there, but I think I switched it because I didn't like the way it was displayed. So I'm just going to copy that code. I'm going to replace 1 plus 1, and I'm going to move Mr. Dracula down a little bit so we have our first slide, or a second slide after the title slide, actually revealing or echoing the code itself. Now if I want that code to be executed, I think it's execute. No, eval. I'm going to set it to false the first time through because by default it's going to try to plot that underneath the code chunk. And so we're going to want to control that as well. There you see kind of a more elaborate code chunk. And so again, with this clipboard, a student or a learner could take this and could paste it into whatever they're working on, and this is workable code for them that they can run on their own machines. The aspect I really like about Quarto and these reveal slides, or any HTML specification using Quarto, is you can also say, I want to include this bit. I want to include the code fences, the 3 ticks, the R. I want that as well. So please give me that. And so there's this fenced option when we echo. And now when I copy that code chunk, it's going to get the whole chunk specification. So if a student or someone that you're working with is interested in not plotting this, not pasting this into an R script, but if you're working within something like a Quarto document, this is the entire code chunk. So it's the same functionality, it's all there, but again, it's helpful. It bypasses one of those obstacles in terms of some of the more procedural, how do I do this kinds of things. So the 3 tick in the curly bracket R specification is fairly unimportant. It's important in terms of getting the document to render like you want, but it's pretty unimportant in terms of getting a learner on board with this system. So it's a great way to share. Let's actually turn the echo off and just do the output. So if I only want to share the output of this, I can say, yes, go ahead and please evaluate that. But now I don't want it. You can go ahead and hide the code. And I'm only doing this for space. You can also have the code. You can also have the code in one column and the output in an adjacent column. But here, and again, you see all the functionality of these plotly objects that's available within these slides. It's just fantastic. Again, if you're teaching quantitative stuff, like how could you not use this? How could you not integrate this within your lecture kind of process? So I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm so glad that I've spent time working on these. And so these are kind of second nature to me, but I want to tell people that might be on the fence with this or might be like, that looks neat, but I'm not sure I want to spend the time on it. You layer and you start basic, and very quickly you get to a level that will make your slides just really be impressive. What else do we want to talk about? We're 10 minutes over already. Let's see if we can fix the lightbox. So we should be able to just do it one by one. Let me do a lightbox search. And then if anyone wants something else, drop it in the comments and we'll see if we can do it. Looks to me like we did it right. So it looks to me like the YAML might be interfering a little bit. So the fact that we had the YAML specified and the lightbox. Now I had it commented out this time. So let's go back. Maybe our Dracul, maybe our Vlad the Impaler is actually, yeah, so now he is. So what was happening there, most of the time with most of these Quarto capabilities, you can say, I want this to apply to the whole document, but there's an exception here with this one thing. It looks to me like Lightbox might not be operating that exact same way. So it's also possible that um, we need to get a little more specific. If the YAML specification is false, I might need further kind of specification of that. All right, let's just do one more thing here. I'm going to look for my slides again. Let's do one more neat feature of these RevealJS. I could go on probably all night with these RevealJS slides. I love them that much. And so I've done, this is number 112 just for these weekly ones. These are all RevealJS slides. I've also done, I don't know, 50 maybe just for other purposes. I'm not sick of them. I still get it. I still like the task of needing to create a RevealJS slide via Quarto. That's still something that I look forward to. It, as a matter of fact, it's become my go-to. Like, I don't want to do this other work. Let's do that, so I feel like I'm being productive. Just so neat, so neat, so neat. Annotation, I guess. Let's do that since we have a code chunk in here. So the annotation is pretty easy. I'd like a easier chunk here. Let's look for some different code. So I want a little smaller code chunk. We can make our own. What am I doing here? Let's just make our own. So we'll say data is, or we'll say number, and then value, and then I'll say core number value. Now, by the way, within these code chunks themselves, you can, just like you were in, you can specify operations just like you would within within an R script. So the same options are available to you as you might see within an R script. There are also shortcut keys. I'm not a huge shortcut key guy, but I do use shortcut keys within code chunks or code blocks to make sure that my R script actually works. So if I do Control Enter, you're going to see that line executed, and you're going to see in my environment here, you're going to see, oh, you know, oh, I was going to say I was going to turn on the pointer, but the pointer's not going to work in RStudio. It's only going to be operational within the presentation itself. I'm going to load value in, and then we'll ask for a correlation. Now, nothing all that groundbreaking there. I have a vector of number, I have a vector of value, but the code annotations are indicated by using that comment convention and then angle brackets with a number within them. And so you just identify the lines that you want to highlight. You can highlight multiple lines, which is really helpful to isolate kind of what you might want a student to key in on. And let's see. You don't need to tab over. I just kind of like to keep my script nice and tidy. So I'm going to do 2 annotations in this code chunk. And I'm going to say, let's make those values a little different, so it's not going to be -1 exactly. And I'm going to make the correlation an object. So we'll say this is Pearson. So Pearsons, I guess I should call it. So I'm not asking for it to be reported. Most of you that are familiar with R will recognize that. I'm just asking for it to be stored as an object. And then what I'm going to do in my document itself is I'm going to call that out. So the way that you specify the content of your annotations is below the code chunk. You just say, all right, there's a number 1 in the code chunk. You know what that should mean? That should say specifying 2 number vectors. And then the second one is saying assigning Pearson's product moment correlation to the Pearson's object. Now, I sometimes use the tick to indicate, and this is kind of a way to communicate among people who generate a lot of code, is the tick indicates that this is something code based or code adjacent or code relevant. And so I'm going to use that. I'm going to use the tick marks intentionally here to show you something. So now I have my code. It's going to be echoed. It's also going to be evaluated. But now I have this extra kind of commenting in here, and I'll put a normal comment in here too, so you can see that silly code. So that's going to render and look just like a normal comment would. I always, in my R scripts, I usually put 2 hashtags in front to indicate my commenting convention. It's kind of by default. And now you see the code itself, and you see also the annotation. Now the annotation by default is going to be presented in this static way, but there's multiple ways to indicate annotation. I like to do the hover on annotation because the hover will give the viewer more information about what the annotation is referencing. So here it looks like number 1 is referencing only line 3. Right? It's contained on line 3, but in fact, when we look at the code, I have that spanning 2 different lines. So we can actually change that. I knew I was going to go over tonight. Sorry, I'll close it after this. In terms of probably style. So the style, you can have, the command is code annotations. You can have it below, which is the default, which we just saw. You can have hover and you can have select. And so let's do hover, which is the one I kind of like. And you can start to see your YAML starting to get a little cluttered. But again, just by layering, you should kind of develop more comfort in terms of just coming into it fresh and looking at it and being overwhelmed. But now the annotations, again, for a learner, it's only there if they need it, only there if they want to interact with it. But the other thing that hover does is it gives you a full window of what I'm referencing here. So you get the visual of number and value. If I were to re-render that by taking this second one off, you're going to see that that window now is only isolated to the number object. So the last thing, I guess, that's neat in here with any Quarto document is you can engage with, you can use inline R script. And so this is fantastic for papers. When I'm running an experiment and I'm collecting data and I'm trying to summarize that, I use inline code to pull from my data objects. In the case that we collect more data or data gets shifted or changed, then these numbers are living pieces of the document itself. It's not residing separately in an analytical program. It's contained within the document. It reads the data and it spits out a number that's relevant and updated for whatever your data actually currently looks like. Now this is going to come through. So look at the difference here between tick Pearson's and tick R Pearson's. So this is saying it's not just something to be isolated in terms of its presentation anymore, which we have here. Comes in green if we use the Dracula theme. But this is now saying, I want you to go into R and I want you to report what the object is. So the object, if we run that, it's, oh, I need to re-specify here. If we run that, it's going to be this ridiculous number. So we probably want to amend that a little bit, but we'll amend that after first running it. So the correlation is blah, 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 blah. And if you wanted to, if you wanted to be a little more presentation worthy with that, you would just add a little more R code. And so this is, I don't do a lot of wrapping of code, but certainly on these inline specifications, that's a good reason to actually do some embedding or wrapping of your code. So using those parentheses and doing multiple specifications within one another. Okay. Anyway, if I could encourage one or two professor types and students, honestly, students, if you are giving student presentations as a graduate student, I wouldn't recommend this for undergraduate students. But if you're a graduate student and want to wow your classmates, play with this, use this, figure out, ask me how to publish it and share it and host it. Do the zombie slides, do multiplex. You're going to control what your fellow students actually see. They're gonna be wowed. They're gonna be, how did you do that? I know there's other fancy presentation capabilities out there. Prezi was a big one for a long time, and there's others. But really, the integration of your quantitative focus with how you present it. I mean, use this. See if you can use this. See if you can build skill using this. I recommend this. I could not recommend this more highly. I'm geeked up on, and I think it's really important to embed your analysis and your narration within the same space. But even beyond that, this way of presenting, I think more people should be using it in an educational context. So if you want any support on that, feel free to reach out, because I'm a huge advocate of this. All right, that's enough blathering from Kulas tonight. So thanks for joining. Next week, we'll be on to the letter S. I was going to do Sweeve, which is an old kind of way of combining your code and your narration, but that's a little too LaTeX-y upon looking into it a little more. So we'll probably end up doing Shiny. Shiny is always fun, and people are always interested in Shiny. Unless someone has a different suggestion for us, because I'm always open for that. All right. Good night, everybody.